Hello, this is William's video on what I've learned about effective instruction in the field of history and social studies. I decided to start at the end of the prompt rather than the beginning with central focus. This is the part in the NTPA that's at the beginning of the lesson plan segment that describes the overall learning objectives and knowledge to be taught. It should include the purpose of these learning tasks and build on and guide past and future lessons as well. With regards to history and social studies, according to the handbook, all lessons should include one, learning tasks with opportunities to develop and apply knowledge, processes, and disciplinary practices to become active and productive citizens. And also two, opportunities for related learners to develop and use facts, concepts, and skills of inquiry, interpretation, or analysis to build and support arguments or conclusions about historical events, a topic, theme, or a social studies phenomenon, defined by NTPA as an observable occurrence, circumstance, or behavior within the discipline. And so teachers should have these at least in the back of their minds when they are making lesson plans and working to effectively instruct their students. So the NTPA identifies three facets of effective instruction as seen in the graphic: effective planning, effective engagement, and effective assessment. So all these things are key for overall effective instruction. So planning in history and social studies, several things I've picked out. One is you try to learn about your students, including their social and cultural backgrounds, to help engage their interests and make use of their, quote, funds of knowledge. And especially in today's diverse society, you're likely to encounter students from a wide range of backgrounds, and it's best to have those work with you rather than against you. Another point of effective planning is organize instruction around big ideas or essential questions. This is actually one of Jim Burke's 10 elements for effective instruction, and it relates to the, as previously mentioned, focus on inquiry. So like for an example, for history, instead of just teaching and having students memorize events and people of the American Revolution, it would be better to construct lessons around inquiry questions like, was the American Revolution necessary? And then when you have the question, you select readings and make assignments that guide or drive students to confront with and answer that big question, and also teach them the necessary skills that they can do that with citing evidence and using facts, etc. So this is part of one of Burke's other elements, designing lesson plans and units for maximum learning engagement. He stresses that the best teaching often isn't spontaneous, it's the result of careful planning. Part of that is focusing on desired outcomes, or backwards planning to create a clear objective or outcome, and then go back to plan activities or assessments to achieve that result. So, for example, say objective is students will learn about the perspectives of Americans to the American Revolution by writing a persuasive essay taking the perspective of a patriot or a loyalist. So activities to support this objective would be to present background knowledge, have students do a close reading of selected primary and secondary text on the American Revolution, structure some class discussions and debates on it, and then have them do a writing assignment with clear instruction and rubrics. Student engagement. So vary your instruction, again, one of Burke's elements. Social studies and history lends itself to a wide variety of different instructional strategies and modes, ranging from direct lecture to group work to academic debates or instructions to close reading of difficult texts, watching, responding to current news events, document-based questions. These are just some of several instructional strategies you can use to vary or do different things to keep students engaged. There are various other engagement strategies that Marzano and others identify that lend themselves to the history social studies classroom. So various means of encouraging students to respond to questions, not have a few students dominate class discussion, use kinesthetic learning or physical movement. One example from our methods class was using pantomime to illustrate what the different bills of rights are. Presenting unusual information, because our topics are full of weird and interesting facts. Or using friendly controversy, because part of teaching students how to be active and productive citizens, as described in the central focus before, is to learn how to discuss issues in a civil manner and debate using in a civil manner. So you can do this with seminars and class votes or town hall meetings. Again, this is something that social studies lends itself to. Finally, we have effective instruction requires effective assessment. Again, it's one of Jim Burke's elements. Mike Schmoker argues that 80% of these assessments should be written responses in the form of explanation, interpretation, and problem solving. And I think I would tend to agree with regards to social studies. Assessment should be used not for grading necessarily, but to understand student learning and provide student timely and meaningful feedback, and also to modify teaching practices if the students are not learning as much as they should. Effective assessment also requires multiple methods. So for social studies, multiple choice tests, teacher observations, discussions, journals, projects, as well as written papers. Again, the subject lends itself to a variety of ways teachers can assess students. Academic language is very important for the various disciplines within social studies, government, history, economics, geography. And it's also important for students to engage in the cognitively complex tasks that are used to understand the content in these disciplines. So we're required to cover academic language in 4 areas: vocabulary, function, syntax, and discourse. Vocabulary are words, phrases that are used within specific disciplines. There's examples on the screen: longitude for geography, medieval for history. Words that have a particular meaning within a discipline that is different from regular social English. Like depression means something different in everyday life than it does in history. Words that are part of general academic vocabulary across disciplines. So these are something that history and social science teachers need to be mindful of constantly when teaching. Discourse is how historians or economists or others talk or write when making and sharing knowledge. And so students need to be learned to how to interpret specific text structures, like a historical article has a different discourse than a primary source. Function is the purpose for which language is used, ideally represented in lesson plans by specific action words. So common ones for history, so social science lessons would be like describe, compare, and sequence. Obviously a non-exhaustive list. And syntax are rules governing how words and symbols are organized to convey meaning. And so teaching things like sentence structures for certain reasoning rules, citations, visual rules like latitude and longitude and geography. And again, these are a part of, to be effective in instruction, you need to be mindful of teaching these literacy language skills as well. Instructional sequencing I interpret that to have multiple meanings. There's a long-term sequencing you find in the history, California standards. Chronological sequencing is logical for history content. There's also pedagogical sequencing as outlined by Marzano and others. The direct instruction plan, the teacher provides new content. The practice and deepening lesson, where the teacher guides and students in working with content. And the knowledge application lesson, so the students work with relative independence. The teacher just provides support, with the ultimate goal of students can apply the knowledge they've learned to make and support claims and do other complex tasks. So it's a sequencing that can be used within a single lesson or within a lesson segment. Finally, in differentiated instruction scaffolding, again, one of Jim Burke's elements is part of supporting all students to ensure success. These concepts, to my mind at least, are somewhat overlapping. They're both supportive practices. Scaffolding is available to all students as they are learning increasingly complex skills. Differentiated instruction are practices aimed to help students with specific differentiated backgrounds and different learning needs. These points are from Burke again. Both are trying to identify and teach the student's strengths. The support, the scaffolds can come in many different forms. Differentiation does not mean creating 30 lessons for 30 students. You need to create flexible ways that students can access, process, and express the content you are trying to teach. And some examples that could be used in HSS classrooms. For scaffolds, we have the front loading of key academic vocabulary and knowledge before the lesson, providing visual aids and clues in the room, the teacher modeling of specific literacy tasks like close reading, graphic organizers, and then the chunking of text and other content into manageable lengths that accompany with checks for understanding. Instead of a student having to read a whole big text on their own. Examples, again, this is a non-exhaustive list of differentiated instruction. It could be strategic grouping, or giving a choice of assignments of varying difficulty but cover the same content, or give school students extra time, or provide special materials like translated materials for English learners, or more detailed or specially configured supporting materials for struggling or special ed learners.